So you can't live. You can't live with the technology. You can't live without it.
Everybody, is that coffee or?
Okay, this is a milestone here of Tzidkas Hatzadik, Ois Beis. No small accomplishment. We went through a number of very, very important Yesodus in Rav Tzaddik to explain Ois Aleph. I don't think I was exaggerating. It was more a question of really being able to understand the concepts that we're coming to on an easier basis. But to remind you of Ois Aleph, what we spoke about was two types of Seder Pesach. There's the Seder Pesach of Mitzrayim, which is called in Chazal Pesach Mitzrayim, and then there's the Seder Pesach of Pesach L'Doros. And it's a different type of a service. Rabbi Tzadok explains the Pesach Mitzrayim was all about chipazon. Quick, go out of here. You're going to see the Shechina, you're going to see the Kriyas Yamsuf, you're going to have tremendous miracles, you're going to ultimately get to Har Sinai. Go quick. Pesach L'Doros that's not the Avodah. The Avodah is not chipazon. The Avodah is to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this Pesach type of a way. And what Reb Tzadok explained is that this is, and he keeps bringing the same Rokeach in his Akdama to the Rokeach. And that the Rokeach says this in Pri Tzaddik, we learned it here in Reish Chav Zayin. He keeps bringing the Rokeach. What the Rokeach says that when one begins a spiritual project, one has a huge or that comes upon them, and but that or doesn't necessarily last. That's an or. You could see it as a gift from Hashem. You see this with every new thing. You start a new Masechta, new Baal Tshuva, a new Beis HaKnesses, a new project. Where everything is new is always exciting, huge or. And as we keep on explaining, that's an important or. But now I'm going to say something very radical and then work into it. That or has to be there, and it doesn't last, and the or itself is a klipa. That's radical. If you don't think that's radical, you haven't been listening for the last 5 weeks. Klipa, it's a klipa, maybe even a klipa tameh.
You've been saying this, that the beginning is the klipas and the end is no.
Ruach, Rash, Eish.
But the Lashon is Abraham told who said that?
So the Balatanya.
That's
either it's a machlekes or we need to get to understand that. But what in our learning of Reb Tzadok, which is I showed to you Borer in the Zohar. It wasn't that Reb Tzadok's Chiddush. It was Borer in the Zohar. That these are shalosh klipos that you have to get through. It could be ein behem toiv klal, so there's a certain ra that you have to use, like b'chol levavcha, yetzer hara, like that kind of ra. Ra doesn't mean necessarily shoot it in the head. Ezu gibor kovesh is yitzra. You bring that on your side, kovesh. It's a lashon of kvisha.
That's similar to the Bnei Aaron.
You want to say something? Yeah.
No, I'm running. Like, is that what they did? Like, they wanted to see Hashem and look and get that
without going through the shells. It was like direct contact.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're going to learn about today in Beis. What's with this direct contact? But I just want to put out that idea that once we learned that the Shalosh Kehillas Hatzadik, and then after that follows that the Klipas Noga. The Shalosh Kehillas Hatzadik are Eliyahu Navi's and Yecheskel Navi's entree into the Klipas Noga, into the Shchinas Hashem Mamash, or Chashmal. Right? So that's where we are. Yeah.
The revelation of Pesach Mitzrayim, which is the divine, the whatever it is, the Siyat Shmai have in the beginning, that's called a klipa.
That's a klipa.
I mean, it's Hashem coming in the Pesach Mitzrayim and Nivel Omal, that's called.
That's why we always get confused when we tell people slow down, because too fast is a klipa. Rushing is a klipa. But I'll give you the best example of this. I think from everything that I've said in the last 6 weeks here is that the ikvus of the Mashiach. We also have to break through, right? So, and it's a new chipazon, a new Yetzias Mitzrayim. The ikvus of the Mashiach chutzpah yeske. So I mentioned what normally everyone explains it that like you're going to see a lot of chutzpah around. The bus driver is going to have chutzpah, the Israelis are going to have chutzpah, the government's going to have chutzpah. That's not what it means. What it means is, pi ha'emes, what it means is chutzpah yaske is. Chutzpah is when you want to achieve something that you don't really deserve. Chutzpah is when you speak where you really shouldn't be speaking. Where you stand where you really shouldn't be standing. That's what the geula is. The geula is chutzpah. We're not roy for the geula necessarily. But the chutzpah yaska, this is what Chazal predict. Chutzpah yaska is the pshat that will get the geula with chutzpah. Meaning, just like we got Yetzias Mitzrayim with chutzpah, we weren't holding, we were shakua in the Memteh Shari Tumah. We're Avdei Avodah Zarah. We had our good things, but it was a getter of chutzpah. And the same thing is with every spiritual odyssey. You start off with chutzpah. The chutzpah is, I want to get something which the Chafetz Chaim got, which the Vilna Gaon got, which the Baal Shem Tov received, which Abaye v'Rav Hillel v'Shammai. I want to get to the exact same place. At least initially. And now we'll talk. And so let's start with Beis. As I mentioned a number of times, the first, I think 34, 35 osios in Tzidkas Hatzadik are a pirush on the first 4 blot of Masechta Brachos. The way it works. So the Tzadok says as follows. Pasuk in Mishlei Yud Vav. Brachos l'roish tzaddik. Everybody familiar with that pasuk? Yeah, you are, because anybody who's seen the Fiddler on the Roof is a blessing on your head. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Brachos l'roish tzaddik is where it comes from. Right. Brachos l'roish tzaddik, a blessing on your head. You never heard of Fiddler on the Roof? Okay. That was one of the cardinal points of my chinuch. Brachos l'roish tzaddik. Rav Tzadok comes with a new, very, very deep touch of this pasuk. Lakach, remember his introduction to Masechta Brachos. Why is Brachos the first Masechta? Why not Menachos? Zvachim, something. Why Brachos? So Lakach Masechtas Brachos has Cholam Mishas. The reason why Maseches Brachos is the beginning of Shas, she'ikar hakol, because the main ikar hakol is da es elikei avicha, ve'achar kach avdehu. Because there's a 2-step process, says Reb Tzadok. Let's read it carefully. The first step is da, to know, just like we say similarly maybe here, da lifnei mi'ata oimed, or shivisi Hashem l'negdi samid. We're going to talk about that. But da is like first know, v'achar kach avdehu, and then worship. What's the difference between knowing and worshiping? What do you say, Yoni? What's the difference between knowing and worshiping? So, shetzarech leida lemi oved. This is not, let's not get mixed up or fall into the trap of superficiality of where we always go, okay, yeah, Reishis Chachmi or Hashem, of course you have to, no, I mean, we're saying something very, very important here, Chiddush. And the Chiddush is that there's 2 steps to Avodas Hashem. The first thing is Da, the second one is Oved. I'll give you a mashal of what this means, is that, you start Shemona Esrei, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Why do we have to establish God's credentials every time we start davening Shemona Esrei? I like it, actually. When I daven, I like that part. So the reason I like that part is because it's important for me to remind myself, this is not just like somebody came up with some God and we're davening to it. This went through the avos of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, who's discovered Hagadol, Hagibor, Va'anoira. These were the Eitanim, as the Rambam calls it. These were giants. And went through generation after generation of Gedolim and Gedolei Adoros and geniuses that understood this is God, that even the Christians recognize, even the Muslims recognize, this is God, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. What is that first chapter, that first paragraph of Shemona Esrei? Da. And I'll tell you something, and then Achar Avdehu. Brachos l'Rosh Tzaddik is, that's where you start. You start with the bracha. The bracha is not yet the Avodas Hashem. It's ma'akev. You have to have kavanah in the first bracha, because otherwise, who are you standing? You're going to say, okay, slach lanu avinu and rifa'enu and give me parnasa and help my children. Seder, who are you talking to? You could be saying all that to some Avodah Zarah lahavdil of Havdalas. The fact that you're crying and you're davening and Shema Koleinu doesn't mean anything unless you've established who you are talking to.
It's for us.
I see it as for us. But all of Avodas Hashem is for us. Who then? Hashem doesn't need us. So the for us has to start off with the idea. So Daika, there are no bakashas in the avos. It's just a statement of glory. Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Va'anoira, Hillel Yoin.
Is it also an acknowledgement that Hashem, I'm on board with Abraham's program and Yaakov's program? Yes,
I don't know that you're saying it differently, but I think the same thing. Yeah, I think
one's one's for us, and one's to saying. By the way, what I'm acknowledging that I know this is for me because I'm on board with these guys.
I tell you something. Just a regesh. This week, I had the opportunity. I was asked to speak for on Zoom for an international organization, secular. I mean, I don't say secular is the wrong word, not from, or not obviously from. So, okay, you're speaking 7:15, I think it was on Monday night, speaking 7:15 on Zoom. And, I got 100 reminders, make sure I'm on Zoom, get there 10 minutes earlier, this and that. So I wasn't 100% sure what to expect, except for that this was not a from crowd, and they wanted me to speak about the concept. The title was MS. Okay. But I don't want to hazard that. Shmooze was very successful, but just want to make my point. I come on, and boom, 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 like this Zoom. So here there's 20 participants. All of a sudden there's got to be 175 people on the screen. All kinds of people and all kinds of places. You could see Mexico, and you could see, well, very interesting. And I'm sitting there. What am I sitting there? I'm waiting for some kind of an introduction. Hello. And then finally I hear this voice from one of those, who knows where it's coming from, one of those names, go ahead, Rabbi. I'm not one that needs like huge introductions or great, but somebody say, this is Yaacov Haber sitting in Israel and he's going to speak to you right now. That's all. Let's establish some kind of, it created a certain awkwardness to me that was there the whole time. Like, who are you? Introduce me to them. And the right thing to do is when you're creating a meeting or you're coming to shul, takir echad et hasheni, like people should introduce. So it's the introduction, literally, to Hashem, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. It's an intro. And we do it all the time, and I love it. But here, the Rabbeinu is putting us a new knetch in it of brachos l'rosh tzaddik. That first da, v'acher kach of deus. So there's this idea of yediyah, which, as I said before, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, elaborated on by the Mishnah Berurah, that if you don't have kavanah in the whole Shemona Esrei, you're yotze Shemona Esrei. You don't do it again. If you didn't have kavanah in the avos, it's ma'akiv. Why? Because it's more important? No, because if you don't know who you're davening to, what are you doing? You could be talking to your therapist. What are you doing? Says Reb Tzadok, v'zehu, let's take it deeper. Brachos, Masechet Brachos, comes before all the other Masechtas, Eruvin, Psachim, comes before everything. Why? Because in Masechta Brachos we learn to know why we're learning Shas. It's not that it's more religious, necessarily. It might be. I believe, by the way, I once delved into this, even the sugyas and brachas, which are not about brachas, are all about getting to know Hashem. Even the agadatas are all about getting to know Hashem. That's what Masechta Brachas is. When you have to give an introduction to Masechta Brachas, this is the introduction. Let's get to know you. Let's know before whom we're talking. Says Reb Tzadok, V'zehu abracha lifnei kol masa. That's why we make a bracha. Leave Masechta Brachas, individual practice. We make a bracha before we learn, before we eat, before we do a mitzvah. Why? Liyached kol masav laHashem. The bracha is not the thing, it's an introduction to the thing. The thing is you're eating, the thing is you're learning Torah. But the bracha is the da lifnei ha'oved. The bracha is l'rosh tzaddik. The chiddush of Reb Tzadok in this pasuk is that rosh means rishon. The beginning of the avodah of every tzaddik is a bracha. K'mo shenemar, as it says in Mishlei, one of the most famous psukim in Mishlei, b'chol drachecha da'ehu, u'k'mo shekasav Rambam v'zeu ayidei bracha, as the Rambam says. We all know this Rambam, he assumes, but the Rambam says that we have to, let's make sure we're clear about it, we have to put the presence of Hashem ultimately into everything that we're doing. And it doesn't mean that the whole day we're, like the day is about thinking about Hashem. The Rambam explains is that there's the start of everything, the element, the beginning element of everything that I do, I'm going to make parnasa. A split-second thought of, this is what Hashem wants me to do. I'm going to support my family. I'm going to take care of things. I'm going to learn Torah. This is what Hashem wants me to do. It's a split-second thing. And you say something nice to somebody. Midos. B'chol drachecha de'ehu. Put the da before the maisa. De'ehu, have the da, as he quotes, da as alikei avicha, ve'acher kach avdehu. V'zehu al yedei habracha. U'k'may Amru, the Gemara says in Brachos Memches, Hashir ba, the shir of a bracha is katan hayodeya lemi mevarchen. Okay, does anybody remember this Gemara? What's it talking about? Okay, Chaim, tell us. We're talking about Birchas HaZimun. Who could be mitzaref in a zimun or not? Well, you got to be bar mitzvah? No, don't have to be bar mitzvah. We paskin, you have to be a bar mitzvah because we can't paskin das, so we go with the chazaka. But be'etzem, the shir, the Gemara says, of participating in a zimun, even leading a zimun. By the way, in the olden days, leading a zimun means you benched out loud and everybody was yotze with you. Didn't mean you said Rabbi Sam Ravel and bench. It means that you're yotze everybody in zimun. The shir the Gemara says, Misha yodeya lemi mevarchen. Odapam, Misha yodeya lemi mevarchen. Because the whole point of bracha is yodeya.
Is it the same shir as from the Darim?
The same shir as in the Darim, and I'm thinking someplace else that I'm trying to where. Oh, Avelus. Katan hayodeya how to be Masavil. Meaning that there's like literally no point. By Yom Kippur, there's a point, chinuch, this and that. There's literally no point of being mechanech a person of Avelus if they have no hasag and Avelus because they're too little. To have hasag and Avelus, it might be very young, but I'm not getting into that halacha now. But this idea of das, know what you're doing. Know what you're doing and then do it. 2-step program. Das. That's kadna yodei lamim avarchen. Masha'en kain b'shar mitzvahs, which is not the case in other mitzvahs. Eina shiur sheyeda lamim enichin tefillin. Are we checking before a child puts on tefillin? We're checking that he knows to who he's putting on the tefillin for. No, that's not a bracha. That's a mitzvah. We're checking before we give a child a shekel. Say, go put this in the pushka.
Are we allowing people to mute themselves?
Are
we allowing people
Sure.
Okay. I have to change the setting, I'm sorry.
That's where they can't get in. Yeah. No, we trust them.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to continue.
By tefillin, by tzitzis, by tzedakah, there's no din. The bitoy of Chazal of Yodei Lamim Mevarchim does not exist. It only exists by a bracha. Why? Shal kach, because here's the key words here. Mevoyer, plus a klar. Shahabracha ikara hayedia lami mevarchin. Shal kach noista. The whole vart ikara of a bracha is yodeya lami mevarchin. So therefore, of course, you can't be mezamein unless you know to whom you are making a bracha, and because that's what a bracha is. So, okay, we learned the big yisoid here. The big yisoid is that the pshat in a bracha, is the yediyah that becomes before the avodah. Just help me to think in your minds for a moment and see if this checks with everything you know about brachas. Birchas HaTorah. Why did the Chorban Beis Hamikdash happen? Shalai Baruchu B'Torah Tchilah. Means to say they were learning Torah, they were even doing mitzvahs, and they were okay. But why was there a Chorban Beis Hamikdash? Shalai Baruchu B'Torah Tchilah, because they didn't have the awareness. The simple Dolev Nemiata Oimed. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Chaim Brisker, I think, says that the kavana hama'akeves in kol tefillah is the dalif nemiyato emid. I go back to this point here that you if you don't know who you're davening to, you could have all the kavana in the world. You could be crying tears, but it's a lo tefillah. The tefillah is amoimed lifnei Hashem. If you don't have that, you did nothing. You're just fetching.
Can we say da like chibur, like Adam Yadad?
Maybe. I think das is a chibur. I think das is a chibur, but I think das is also das. Yeah. Das. You know what a child's bar mitzvah? What we're looking for him to be is a bar das. How could you be chayav in mitzvahs if you don't know why you're doing the mitzvahs? You could a bracha. It's not a bracha. It's not that you're not chayav in a bracha. So this bracha. A bracha is that yediyah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. That's the yediyah. That's the das. Yeah. Like a cow?
Kav.
Oh, kav. I don't know what you mean, so elaborate.
Meaning it's the process of how it goes from subconscious to...
Oh, the line of, yeah. Okay. So Gil, so it's Mustaver that of course the das creates the chibur. Botak yeret chayim. Let's have some das here.
How much is that it's not in the Bible? Here we say da kevicha v'achakav day. Sounds like
the Masechta Brachas comes first.
We have a day who Birchas Mitzvah is not ma'akev the mitzvah.
So that means it has no value. That's what that means. There's only one reason to learn Torah Shaloi Lishma. Shemitach Shaloi Lishma Bat Lishma. Unto itself it has no mashmois. But I'll tell you, it's clear in the Poskim Mishnah Berurah that there's a big steer in Shulchan Aruch all over whether we say mitzvah strichas kavana or light strichas kavana. It's very confusing. Sometimes. But the Mishnah Berurah says that I think it's in Siman Ches. The Mishnah Berurah says that mitzvah strichas kavana. You don't need the kavana in the etzem mitzvah, but you have to know you're doing a mitzvah. You have to have das. Yeah.
Speaking of das, ladat,
Yodea.
there are different levels of das. The simplest level is probably just acknowledgement. It seems to me that what we're talking about here is internalization. It's Kehillat Shivtei Yeshurun. It's Kehillat Shivtei Yeshurun in terms of das. Would that be correct? How do you define that?
I don't know any reason why we have to go any deeper than to know. Meaning, like I say, I'm introduced. He's introduced to me. I'm introduced to them. It's a different shmooze. The knowledge, when we say dalif ne'miyata omed, it doesn't have to mean anything Kabbalistic. Dalif ne'miyata omed. Let's establish our relationship. Let's establish who you are. Oh, you're the one who created the world. Let's talk. It's isn't it a good example of this? Isn't it so important that before Hashem said anything, He said, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher etzisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim." Is that really 10 commandments? What's the commandment? Let me just tell you who I am. Because you could be standing at Har Sinai and you could Hashem, Hashem, like you could be standing at Har Sinai. So the das is the first one. Let me go a little further. I'm sorry. V'zehu haschalos haknisa l'Torah. This is how you step one of anything Torah. K'moshenemar reishis chachma yiras Hashem. As we know, reishis chachma yiras Hashem. Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. That's the pasuk that we're familiar with. Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. V'yir shamayim. Hu ayidei v'yir shamayim. We talk about yiras Hashem, right? Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. So yir shamayim hu ayidei shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. A fantastic chiddush here. That it says on the Aron Kodesh, shivisi Hashem l'negdi sam. Everybody knows that when you daven, shivisi means what?
Place. Place. It's equivalent. It's from the Shaveh.
What does that mean? Shivisi Hashem l'negdi samid? Imagine.
It's the place.
I equalize Hashem before me always.
Equalize. That's what you're saying. Shaveh.
Also to place it. I place Him. He's in front of me. His presence is with me always.
So what are we supposed to do? Shivisi. How do you equalize Hashem? I don't even know what those words mean.
I have recognized that He is. I've placed Him. Obviously, He's there. I've recognized that He is.
I have placed Him.
That's what the placing means.
Recognition.
What does the word mean? I like Shaveh. So let's first say the chiddush that he says. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi samid is not the avoda, it's the step before the avoda. In other words, let's establish who you are. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. The tamid is a kasha, but let's leave it. Shivisi Hashem. I'm creating a image of Hashem. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi samid. K'mashikasa ba'agod the reisha or Chaim. The famous Ramah, Aleph of Shulchan Aruch, is Shivisi Hashem l'negdi samid. So we should know what it means. Behooves us to know what it means. Siman Aleph, Sif Aleph. The lashon of the Ramah, by the way, comes from the Rambam.
So the Malbim on the pasuk says that it's from lashon sima, like Malan Shisi also Saibik here both.
Establish. I'm wanting to translate it as establish. Shivisi Hashem, if you're asking to me, I just want to get there. Establish Hashem Lenegdi Summit. The Lashon of the Rambam, the Lashon of the Ramah rather, is the Lashon of the Rambam in Mar Nevuchim. That's where that comes from. And is it here? Kishiyasim Adam al Libay Shamelach Hagadol HaKadosh Baruch Hu Asher Malei Kol HaOretz Kevoidoi Oimei Dolev Roya B'Maisa Miyad Yagia Elav Hayira V'Hachna V'Fachad Hashem Yisparach U'Bushasai B'Menu Tami. That's the Lashon of the Rambam, which the Ramah brings. I know you thought everybody thinks that, but I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. What is imagined is to damelacha or to establish. Take my touch. Establish Hashem. Establish who you're talking to, who you're standing in front of. And the Ramah Siman Aleph Sif Aleph. This is the first thing. Like establish God in your life. Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit.
What is the Lashon Bracha? Necessary to teach Das, to reach a person Das.
Why bracha? Okay. Let's hold that for a second. It might be answered. I just want to point out to you, it just occurs to me, that the Rambam Mishnah Torah, which I don't have in front of me, but I know by heart, at least the first line, Yisoid ha-Yisoidos v'sherish ha-avoida, Leida es Hashem. Sheesh Hashem Elikei. Elikat. Yisoidos v'sherish ha-avoida, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Lios Yodeya, to be Habdas. That's the first thing. Yisoid ha-Yisoidos v'sherish ha-avoida. First thing, before you go anywhere. Sheesh Shum. Whenever you get to this Rambam, while I'm here, whenever the Rambam says Shum, it's always confusing. Where? He says it in Hilchos Tshuva. He says it in a few places. He says Shum. So the Kesef Mishnah right here in Aleph of the Rambam says Shum means po in Arabic. B'lashon Yishmaeli. Sheish po. He says there, it's here. It's counter what? Right, but this word he stuck with the Arabic. So he says B'lashon Yishmaeli. Shum means po. There it's first Kesef Mishnah. Okay. So I'm just saying that everything starts with Das. The Rambam starts with Das. The Ramah starts with Das. The Hainu Bracha Shekulan Maschilan, and here we're going to learn something fantastic. Brachais Shekulan Maschilan B'Lashon Noicheach, and it ends in a Lashon Nister. Let's explain. What's Nocheach? What's Nister? Nocheach means when I say you. First person, second person, I'm the first person, you're the second person, and Lashon Nister is he. So, Baruch Atah Hashem. You don't even speak to your rabbi that way. You. Blessed art thou, right? You. So, okay, Chaim, you're right. We learned a lot of Nefesh Chaim about what this Lashon Bracha is, and I think it's going to be useful here. But the Baruch Atah starts off with the Lashon Nocheach. You're right in front of me, and then it works into a Lashon Nister, counterintuitive. We should be getting closer to Hashem. We start off with a Lashon Nocheach, we go to Lashon Nister. Baruch Atah Hashem, nice. Elokeinu melech haolam shakol niyeh bidvaroi. It's bidvaro. Says Rav Tzadok. Noicheach shemiyad ba'ascholos habrachot tzarech liyos Hashem yisbarach noichach einav. Ki'ilu oimed alavim mitzaveu, because the beginning of the avoda is I've established shivisi Hashem l'nagdisam. Va'asiyum l'shain nister demiyad ne'elam, because Hashem goes away. It goes into Nister because we can have, and this takes us back to Tzidkas Hatzadik Aleph, we could have the experience of seeing Hashem mamish in front of us, v'ne'elam, and then he disappears. And this is true with every new venture. This is true with every Rosh Hashanah and every beginning of Zman and every Baal Tshuva. This is true. And by the way, it's important to know because a lot of times people have this unbelievable first experience and they come back for the second experience and it's disappointing. You know, they want to have that again. It doesn't work that way. That was a certain or chodosh that we received at the beginning. That's koydem the avodah. That's the Pesach Mitzrayim. Shivchal Ayam, Mashallah Yecheskel Ben Buzi. But it doesn't work for the FFBs. you got to keep on coming back and struggling and okay. So, but it doesn't work because. I think I once said here in Shul, I don't know if it's my vort or I saw somewhere, I don't know, but the Rashi says in Bereshis that Yitzchak was answered and Rivka was not answered for a child because Ein Adoim et Tfilas Tzadik ben Tzadik l'Tzadik ben Rasha. So everybody asked the kasha. Yitzchak was the son of Abraham Avinu. His tefillah was answered. Sarah was the daughter of Rivka was the daughter of a Rasha. So her tefillah was not answered. But what do you mean? Balei tshuva, malkam shebalei tshuva, imdim tzadikim gemur meinu yicholam. What are you saying about tshuva? Tefillah shouldn't be answered. It's higher than a tzadik. So I once mentioned. I think the pshat is that for a Baal Tshuva, it's no kunst to daven. Of course you daven. It's a davar chadash. It's a beautiful thing. Let's daven to Hashem. For the tzaddik ben tzaddik, it's very hard to have kavanah. Would he daven 3 times a day? It's very hard to have kavanah. But every time, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu Abraham, Elokeinu Yitzchak, Elokeinu Yaakov, every time. But that's the Pesach Doiros. That's not the Pesach Mitzrayim, yeah? Miyad Nelam. Okay, let me just finish the sentence so I don't leave without finishing the sentence. K'may shenemar, and he brings here a pasuk. Al goizolav yirachev. Noigeya ve'eno noigeya. Yodua. Where's our Gozolav Yirachev? Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Ha'azinu. Kenesher Ya'ir Kinoi. He's talking about probably Yetzias Mitzrayim. Kenesher Ya'ir Kinoi al Gozolav Yirachev. So in the Parshas Ha'azinu, the mashal is that the great eagle comes to wake up its eaglets. And how does it do it? Al Gozolav Yirachev. It's Yirachev. Word association. When I say Yirachev, what pasuk comes to? Ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim. So what does it mean? Says Rashi, Al Makom Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya. Yirachev means Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya. The eagle is hovering over the nest. Like this eagle would not get a job in the yeshiva dormitory. You don't hover over the nest. You pour water in their face. Get out of bed. The eaglets are sleeping. It's time to go for a big long trip. Yirachev. Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya. Listen to the way Rav Tzadok HaKohen is using this. Hashem in our lives is Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya. He's Yirachev, Ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim. He's there and he's gone. It's called in Kabbalistic terminology, coming from the pasuk in Yecheskel, which I'd like to speak about not today, Ratzei v'shav. I need to explain that. That's a huge concept. But he doesn't say Ratzei v'shav. He says Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya, that there's a certain, by design, there's a certain lack of consistency and constancy in my relationship with Hashem. Pesach L'Doros, so yeah. Say.
Meaning it's there, but it's not real. Nogeya ve'eno Nogeya, meaning it's there, but it's not. It hasn't been fully experienced.
That was the Pesach Mitzrayim thing, yeah. And on a daily basis, no, his example is that I could say the Avos and I could fall asleep during Slach Lanu. Nogea ve'eino nogea, I every time anew have to establish das. To have das, to be a bardas. There's not enough bardasses in this world, by the way. I just want to make this point. There's a lot of brilliance. There's a lot of brilliance, but there's no das. They talk about das Torah. There's das. You don't have to be a gadol to have das. You have to be 13 years old to have das. Das is just like knowing and establishing, like where I am, who are you, just the maturity to not try to be something that we're not, to not think in places where you don't understand. It's all das. Like, I am where I am. The difference between a mature person and an immature person is like I have a sense of attachment here. I have a sense of reality. I'm not like flying. And you need das in business. You need das in Torah. You need das in everything. So
is that the Dordea? Like that's what we mean by Dordea.
Very nice, Dordea. So I'm just. Al-Goizel of Yerachef, let me just take my last 3 minutes for today and just try to have a picture of this in my mind, because I find it very moving. Again, we're talking about the bracha that starts with Lashon Nocheach. I'm standing in front of Hashem. Baruch Atah Hashem, I'm so close. That's just the beginning hashpah. That's just the das that comes before the avodah. Umiyad nelam. Then Hashem walks away. Was he walking away from me for? I'm not talking to you. What are you walking away? The answer is now I have to grab. I have to harva. I have to learn. I have to use my the rest of me. The reish is chachma yiras Hashem. I start off with that, like this blitz. So I said at the beginning, yiras Hashem is a klipa. It's a meforsha Gemara. It's a meforsha Gemara. What's the Gemara? The Gemara says, maybe in Shabbos Lamed Aleph, the Gemara says that Mishiyesh Loi Torah ve'en lo yiras shamayim. He's doimah to somebody who has the maftechos hapnimiyos ve'en lo maftechos hachitzonius. You can get into the building, but you can't get into you can get into the apartment, but you can't get into the building. So Mazel Tov. You have the maftechos Torah, maftechos hapnimiyos. You have the keys to the Kodesh HaKadosh. But if you can't get into the Harabayas, what do you don't have? So your Shemayim is the outside wall. So before Gemara, your Shemayim is the outside wall. It's not the real thing. Just hear me out for the next minute, because I don't want you to fall asleep now. Your Shemayim is a klipa, but that it's meaning a klipa means it's the first step of entry. If you stay there, it's wrong. The Yiras Shamayim is the dal ifnei mi'ata oimed, and then daven. The Birchas HaTorah is first say the brachas, no, understand why I'm learning Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, and then learn. It's if I can't spend the rest of my relationship with you introducing each other, introducing you to me and me to you, and extolling. Beseder, we did that. Now let's work. It's you don't get stuck in the klipa, but you have to go through it. So let me say this, that I have this image in my mind of most of you guys are younger than me, but if you want to go on a trip or something, and you want to leave at 2:00 in the morning, so to get there at a certain time, so what you do is you carefully go into your kids' rooms. And without waking them up, you pick them up and you carefully put them into the car seat. And you carefully, God forbid they should wake up for many reasons. and Al Goizolov Yerachef, like it's a certain gentleness that we have when you're transferring somebody who's not yet time to wake up. If it's the morning, wake up. But if it's the middle of the night, gentle. You understand that Kenesher Yarkinov Al Goizolov Yirachev. They were not they were not roy for the Geula. It wasn't Boker. It wasn't Boker. So the gentle comes and the eagle comes and gently hovers. It's like the world. Ruach Elikim Mirachefes Al Haaretz Nogea ve'enu Nogea. Now it becomes our work. It becomes our work, and it brings us to the concept of Ratzav V'Shoiv, which I want to talk about next week. But we did a whole base today. I just want to point out. And Yashar Koyach. Anybody, any comments, please, here or there?
I'm just thinking about the beginning of the bracha being in Nochat and the end being in Nistar. There's one exception, which is the bracha of Modim.
Very nice.
Why is that one different from all the others?
Because the whole Modim is Nochach. You say thank you. You don't do it al Yidei Shliach. Why do we have to join in for Modim D'Rabbanan? Why don't we yotze with the Shliach Tzibur? Because there's no Shliach Tzibur for saying thank you. Somebody did something good for you. Say thank you. It's a wonderful deal.
There's actually another one in the Nusach of Chutz La'aretz for during the Yom Kippur
Yeah. For those that say it once in a while. Shos Chalavat Roy Lavoy. No. Okay.
Perhaps the reason we will be like morning wake up.
Just 1 second, Shmuel. Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
The Geula flavor, the Kehillat maybe today, will be this kind of morning wake up, like in the yeshiva, or it's going to be like the eagle hovering over.
It's Machlaik. The Machlaik is in the Gemara. Kima Ugal. It's little by little. The Gemara, Yerushalmi asks the question and says, okay, this is going to be a little by little thing. Kima. Wake up. Nogea ve'enu Nogea. And no, we see it. We see Mamish. Is this the Geula? It seems so much like it's the Geula. We're here, yes. And sometimes it seems like, oh, this is not the Geula. This is the Geula. Leave me out. You know. So this is the Nogea ve'enu Nogea. Shmuel, what do you want to say?
Perhaps when we address the Rebbe, we don't say you, because really, I want to relate to you. I'm really here because I want to relate to Hashem Yisborach. So if I just say you, then I'm losing the right context, perhaps. And I just say the Rebbe to acknowledge that it's me and the Rebbe together. We're trying to relate to Hashem Yisborach. But if I say you, I just want to relate to you.
Yafa. Chaim, what do you say, Chaim? Yodel and Anea. Yeah.
I'm saying like all
it's all Yodea, but it's not Yodea Lemi Menanim.
It's just knowing how
to do it. You got to know how to do the act. So yes, you need Yodea, but not Yodea Hashem. Right? It's not Yodea Hashem.